Jerome Harrison goes off last week, but is that where it ends? That question and more answered on Fantasy Hot, not starting right now. Lauren Shehadi, Jamey Eisenberg, good to see you. As always, this video brought to you by Norton Denier of digital dangers everywhere. Let's get right into the questions. Beanie Wells, Jerome Harrison both played great last week, so the question is, I need one of these guys from Beanie Wells, Ryan Grant, or Jerome Harrison. Wells and Grant both have great matchups, and I'd hate to watch Harrison blow up on my bench. What do I do?
Well, hopefully you can start 3 of these guys if you have a flex option. But if you can only start 2 of them, you got to keep Ryan Grant active because he scores a touchdown at Pittsburgh, which is almost impossible to do. He was only the second running back to accomplish that feat this season, joining Adrian Peterson. Then you're seeing what Jerome Harrison did in his fantastic game. And I think you got to keep Harrison in your lineup. It's hard to bench Beanie Wells, who's got such a fantastic matchup coming up against St. Louis, but I think you got to look at what the Cardinals have in store and what's around Beanie Wells. I think Beanie Wells is going to be an absolute star this week, but I think Jerome Harrison is going to have to carry that Browns offense now that Brady Quinn is out. Derek Anderson's in. You're going to see Harrison probably touch the ball 20-plus times. He should do fantastic against the Raiders. You can't bench Ryan Grant, as we said, because he's got Seattle. So, Lauren, if you have to bench one of these 3 guys, it's got to be Beanie Wells. Now, again, Beanie Wells, he may be actually our start of the week this week. So I think you're looking at a guy, we love him. We think he's going to do great. He's definitely ranked in our top 15 guys. But I think the other 2 guys just have better matchups and are playing better.
Well, Beanie Wells had a good matchup last week against the Lions, right? And now he has a good matchup again.
He did well.
That's a tough one. All right, this next one, maybe this will be a little bit easier to determine. I have Peyton Manning going against the Jets. Brett Favre against the Bears. Manning is the better quarterback. Favre has the better matchup. Can I trust him? I think a lot of fantasy owners want to know, can they trust him?
You're saying this is an easy one? I have to decide between Peyton Manning and Brett Favre. Manning against the Jets and Brett Favre, who looked awful last week against Carolina. I think you can't bench Peyton Manning as long as you know he's going to play a full game, and so far that's the way it looks while we're recording this video. So I think you're talking about a scenario where Peyton Manning should play well, but I would not be afraid of Brett Favre. I know there's a lot of concern because what we've seen of him in December, what we saw of him last week, we know about the arguing between him and Brad Childress and what the Vikings offensive line looked like. For the first time, really looked vulnerable against that Panthers defense. But I think you're talking about a scenario where he's facing a team he's already played once already this year in the Chicago Bears, had a great game against them, and I think the Bears have shown they give up 4 passing touchdowns to Joe Flacco last week. Favre's going to come out Monday night. He's going to want to show that he's okay, and I think you'll see them play well. Now, the key to Brett Favre, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with this answer because, again, I think Peyton Manning is still the better option, even with the tougher matchup. The thing with Brett Favre, we got to find out the health of Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin is banged up dealing with this bulging disc situation, and he misses this game. It's going to lower Favre's value just a little bit. But I still think you could trust Brett Favre because of Sidney Rice, because of Asante Shenko. They'll use Bernard Berrien. They'll throw the ball to Adrian Peterson and Chester Taylor. I like Brett Favre this week. This
question's interesting, Jamie, because I was talking with Pete Prisco, our NFL columnist, earlier today. He says he doesn't know if Peyton Manning, just like you said, all signs point to yes, but with those Jets defense, with them going after him, he wasn't certain. So it'll be interesting.
The one good thing is that they're at home, so I think that helps. If this was in New York, much different scenario.
Different story.
And I like the way you're name dropping, by the way. I spoke to Pete Prisco.
That's right. Excuse me. Excuse me. Your 3rd question of the day. You better listen up, right? Can I safely start Steve Smith again, even with Matt Moore, the starting quarterback? Will he do okay on the road against the Giants? Tough matchup there.
Hey, that was a tough matchup for him last week, too, against the Vikings and Antoine Winfield. But you know what? He came out, had his best game of the season, 9 catches, over 150 yards and a touchdown. And the Giants, their secondary is still vulnerable. I think the Giants will go ahead in this game, and that will allow the Panthers to be throwing from behind. It's hard to bench Steve Smith the way he's playing right now. You know, we had him as a sit last week, and he certainly outplayed that by a long shot, and he played great. You know, the key for the Panthers is going to be keeping Matt Moore standing up against this Giants pass rush because they lost their 2 outside tackles, their right and their left tackle, both out for the season for the Panthers, but they did a great job against Minnesota. A little bit tougher on the road, but the also thing to keep in mind is D'Angelo Williams dealing with an ankle injury. He may not play, so that's going to really make the Panthers have to throw just a little bit more. But you know what? Matt Moore's got 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He had 1 touchdown 2 weeks ago against New England, 3 touchdowns last week, and I think you're seeing a guy that's really starting to come along and trying to prove that he may be able to be a starter for the Panthers going into 2010. So Steve Smith definitely falls in line as a quality number 2 fantasy wide receiver.
Definitely making their case. All right, I have a question for you, Tom Brady. Alex Smith, who is at home against Detroit. This is a tough one because it's the lion factor.
Absolutely.
Dave and I talked about this yesterday.
Yep, there is the lion factor in there. You see what Brady did last week in what was really a tough matchup. You know, Buffalo's done a great job against opposing quarterbacks, so I think you got to be careful if you're thinking about Matt Ryan this week. But I think when you look at Tom Brady going into this game at home against a Jacksonville defense that their secondary is not very good at all, I think this is a game where Tom Brady gets healthy. you'd be very happy to start Alex Smith this week because, as you mentioned, the Detroit factor. But I still think it's hard to bench Tom Brady. If you got to this point with Tom Brady and you overcame what happened last week, you should be fine this week because you're looking at a scenario. Jacksonville does not rush the passer, so Brady should have time to stand back there and make some plays. I think Peyton Manning last Thursday had a pretty good game against this Jaguars defense too. So I think you're talking about Tom Brady, Randy Moss, Wes Welker. They'll play fine.
And it's just so hard to sit your stud.
Absolutely.
All right. Lance from New York wants to know, last question of the day, so get ready. I snuck into the playoffs with Arian Foster doing nothing for me. Now I need to replace him. Can I really count on Michael Bush or Maurice Morris?
Yeah, this is interesting because you're looking at a list of guys here. Not only that, and if you go back to our Move Makers video, when you talk about guys like Jason Snelling coming back into the fold, Michael Turner not being there, Quentin Ganther has gotten you a couple touchdowns now, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 weeks. We know Arian Foster was expected to play well, but he struggles. Now you're seeing guys like Michael Bush, because of Justin Fargas being out with a knee injury, facing a very bad Browns run defense, and also Maurice Morris, who got very good production last week in his first game starting for the injured Kevin Smith. So I think you can start these guys, but it's going to take a real specific scenario. You're not going to bench somebody who's playing really well or has a great matchup that's been getting you to this point to play one of these guys. But I think you're talking about if you've been struggling with your second running back spot, if you've been struggling with your flex position, and you need to plug somebody in there. I'll tell you what, Lauren, I am actually in a fantasy championship where I basically made it to this point based on my 3 wide receivers of Andre Johnson, Randy Moss, and Marcus Colston. My running backs were basically Ronnie Brown and just sort of a rotation of that second spot.
Okay.
I just went out today and I picked up Michael Bush and I picked up Maurice Morris, and I'm going to probably start one of those guys to pair with Jonathan Stewart, because this is going to have to help me get into the to win the championship, which I hope I do. And I hope one of these guys is going to come through for me. I'm probably going to lean a little bit more on Michael Bush if Fargas is out, but I would certainly not be hesitant to start a guy like Maurice Morris.
All right, so you're doing it. You can do it as well. You can also watch Fantasy Football Today every Sunday at 11 o'clock. We'll see you soon.